My entire world crumbled the day I discovered my husband had been unfaithful. It wasn't just any betrayal. It was with someone close to our family, someone I never in a million years would have suspected. The deception hit me like a speeding train. You spend years building a life with someone, trusting in the love they vowed to you, only to realize it was all a lie. And for what? A fleeting thrill? A shameful secret that tore my heart to pieces? I wasn't snooping, at least not at first. But when your instincts start screaming at you, ignoring them becomes impossible. It began with small things. Him staying out late with weak excuses, his phone constantly in his hand, and that smug grin, as if he believed he was untouchable. One night, while he was in the shower, I finally gave in and checked his messages. I know people say you shouldn't do that, but I don't regret it. Not for a second. What I found made my stomach churn. Flirtatious texts, pictures no married man should ever receive, and worst of all, her name. Her name. A name I knew. A name I trusted. I sat there trembling, staring at the screen as if my sheer will could change what I saw. But it didn't. And suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights, the distant stares, the way he treated me like I was invisible in my own home. I didn't confront him immediately. No. I played it cool, even though every second near him made my skin crawl. I needed time to think, to plan, because I wasn't about to let him walk away unscathed, not without understanding exactly what he had done to me, to us, to our family. When the moment arrived, I waited until he was home, sat him down, and laid everything out. Screenshots, timestamps, lies. He tried to deny it, of course. Typical. But then he saw the evidence. Undeniable proof staring him in the face. And just like that, his whole demeanor shifted. He went from defensive to pathetic, pleading with me to be reasonable, to not ruin what we had. Ruin what we had. He had already destroyed it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I spoke with a chilling clarity that even startled me. I told him I finally saw him for who he truly was, and I wasn't going to play the fool any longer. Then I walked out, got in my car, drove. No destination, no plan, just away from him, from the pain, from everything that reminded me of the life I thought I had. I kept driving until my eyes stung with exhaustion and the gas light flickered on. I pulled into a rundown roadside motel in the middle of nowhere, a place that didn't ask questions and didn't expect answers. That first night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the cracked ceiling, replaying every lie he ever told me, the I love yous, the promises of forever, the way he held my hand in public like I was his world. It all felt tainted now, like something I needed to scrub off my skin. By morning, I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not to him. Not to that house. I was done being a doormat. For once, I was going to put myself first. So I drove west, as far as I could from everything. The weight on my chest didn't disappear with each mile, but at least it didn't suffocate me like it did back home. Somewhere between nowhere and nothing, I stopped at a tiny diner off the highway. You know the type. Greasy tables. A waitress who calls you hun before you've even sat down, and the scent of burnt coffee that somehow felt comforting. I needed a break. A moment to just exist without my mind spiraling into 1,000 scattered thoughts. The waitress placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of me, and for some reason, maybe the simplicity of it, I broke down, sobbing right there in that sticky booth. She didn't ask questions. She just slid a napkin toward me and said, "Whatever it is, it's not worth breaking yourself over." Her words hit me like a brick. Was I really breaking myself? Had I let him turn me into something fragile, something shattered? Because that's not who I am, or at least not who I want to be. That's when I decided no more running. I couldn't just keep driving aimlessly, lost and empty. I needed a plan, a purpose. He had already taken so much, my trust, my security, even my sense of self. But I wasn't going to let him steal my future. So I started making calls. The first was to my best friend, Sarah, the only person I could trust with everything. She picked up on the first ring, her voice filled with panic. "Are you okay? Where are you?" she fired off, not even giving me a chance to speak. I left him, I said, my voice trembling. I found out about her. I left. Silence. Then a deep breath. "Good," she said firmly. "You don't deserve that." A pause. "But what are you going to do now?" I didn't have an answer yet, but Sarah, being Sarah, had a plan within minutes. "No questions asked," she said. "Come stay in my guest room in Seattle. Just an open door and a fresh start." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a lifeline. The next day, I packed up the few things I had grabbed from home, got in my car, and pointed it toward Seattle. With every mile, I felt a little stronger, a little more like myself. The woman who cried in that diner, she wasn't going to stay broken. No, she was going to rebuild. The drive felt different this time. It wasn't like the first stretch, where I was running on fumes and heartache, unsure of where I was heading. Now, I had a destination, a goal. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about starting over, even if I had no idea what that looked like yet. I thought about everything on that drive. How I had lost myself in a marriage that turned out to be a lie. How I had ignored the warning signs because I didn't want to believe my life wasn't perfect. And honestly, how much of myself I had sacrificed just to make him happy. I had spent so much time being his wife that I forgot who I was outside of that. Who even was I anymore? By the time I rolled into Seattle, it was late. The city lights flickered like a welcome I didn't know I needed. Bright, chaotic, alive. It was everything my old life wasn't, and I was ready for that kind of energy. Sarah met me at her door with a hug so tight I nearly broke down all over again. She didn't push me to talk, didn't demand details. She just helped me carry my things inside and said, "We'll figure this out." For the first few days, I did nothing. I let myself rest, for the first time in what felt like forever. But it wasn't easy. Every quiet moment was a battle. A fight not to text him, not to call and scream at him, not to fall back into the cycle of searching for a closure I knew I'd never get. Sarah was a lifesaver. She dragged me out of the apartment, taking me to coffee shops and vintage stores, reminding me that the world still existed beyond my heartbreak. At first, it felt forced, like I was just going through the motions to keep her happy. But then something started to shift. We were strolling through Pike Place Market when I noticed a woman selling handmade jewelry. She looked so content, sitting there at her small table covered with earrings and necklaces, offering a warm smile to everyone who passed by. That moment hit me. I wanted that. Not the jewelry business, but the freedom to live life on my own terms. I didn't know what that would look like for me yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Later that night, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. It wasn't much, just a list of things I longed for. Stability, independence, a chance to rediscover myself. At first, it felt silly, like some cliché self-help exercise. But the more I wrote, the more I realized how much I had lost over the years. This wasn't just about leaving him. It was about finding myself again. That night, after pouring my heart onto those pages, Sarah convinced me to go out. "You need to have fun," she insisted, dragging me to a trendy bar downtown. I wasn't exactly in the mood, but sitting in the apartment wasn't doing me any favors either. So I let her dress me up. Tight jeans that hugged my hips, a low-cut top that reminded me I still had a great figure. For a woman in her 30s, I had curves in all the right places, something I never truly appreciated because my husband never bothered to notice. His loss. The bar was packed, the music pulsing, people laughing like they didn't have a single worry in the world. At first, I felt out of place, but then I saw him, David. He was leaning against the bar, tall and broad-shouldered, with a smile that could make you forget your own name. His smooth, deep brown skin glowed under the dim lights, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that was impossible to ignore. I'd always been drawn to men like him, though I never acted on it. I used to tell myself it was because I wasn't their type, but deep down, I think I was just afraid to go after what I truly wanted. David caught me staring, and instead of glancing away like a nervous schoolgirl, I held his gaze. He smiled. Before I knew it, he was walking toward me. "Can I buy you a drink?" he asked, his voice rich and smooth, like honey dripping from a spoon. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure." Something strong. We talked for hours, and it felt effortless. So natural. He asked about me, actually listened, and never once made me feel like I was boring or too much. When I finally told him I was in the middle of leaving my husband, he didn't even flinch. "His loss," he said simply, his eyes locked onto mine. I don't know what came over me, but I leaned in and kissed him, right there in the middle of that crowded bar. It wasn't hesitant or unsure. It was bold, filled with everything I had suppressed for years. And when he kissed me back, I knew I wasn't going home alone that night. We ended up at his place, and let's just say, David did not disappoint. For the first time in years, I felt alive, seen, desired, like a damn queen. He treated me as if I were the most beautiful woman in the world, and I soaked up every second of it. A week later, I filed for divorce. My husband didn't even fight me on it. He couldn't, not after everything he had done. I took half of everything, his money, his pride, the life he thought he controlled. And while he was left scrambling, I was finding myself again, with David by my side, treating me like the queen I had always deserved to be.